University of California, Santa Barbara, USA. He's going to be virtually present, and he is going to talk about basically his latest work on prediction and forecasting, and essentially with specific reference to his and his team's work in East Africa. We will follow him with Mr. Amos Romania. He's here, Senior Energy Advisor at PowerShift Africa, and they have done an excellent study recently on carbon markets, and I'm hoping that we will hear him talk about it. And then Mr. Narayan will, can we talk with our own study on carbon markets that we have released recently. Plus, we will open up the floor for questions, and if there are any more, issues and comments that we want to discuss, we will do that. So, Nidhi, I will start from the
now, so can you do one thing? Tell us what is the boundary to roam around. I have a habit, as you know, of arching up and down, and then you said that it's not my camera. So up to the box. So people remember, all speakers remember, this is the line. Okay, you can't cross this, and you can't go that side because it's being streamed, so that the people who are what we have virtually will get lost. Okay. So welcome back, everybody. Again, such a pleasure to be with all of you. I think yesterday was a fascinating day to understand the big picture. We're going to do some deep dives today, and the first is on climate change. Now, I don't want to get into the whole question about climate change because I think we all understand it today. And for people living in this region, in this continent, as much as where I come from, we don't need to be preached about the importance of climate change. We see it happening in our lives. We see it breaking every day in the extreme weather events that we know are not usual anymore. These are unusual. We also know the question about the politics of climate change and how little has been done to address the real issue of mitigating emissions. We know the fossil fuel interest. We know the fact that we, in this continent and in the subcontinent where I come from, have a huge burden on us. We have a burden of the impacts of climate change that we are seeing, and we also have the burden of having to move differently, but without the resources that we can do so at the scale and speed that is needed. And that's really the challenge of climate change. And I know that as the build-up of COP28 happens in Dubai in early December, you will be reporting a lot on what the issues are. And I hope that you will reach out to us if there are any questions, queries, we'll be happy to do so. And I know also that Suparno is planning some further interactions on the politics of climate change and what you would expect in the negotiations between now and December. But for today, we want to focus on our report on Africa and the key issues that we see are important. So the first issue, and why we have Chris, and I hope he has joined us, we invited him to speak first, is because the big crisis of climate change is showing up in terms of extreme weather events. Now you hear very glibly the talk about adaptation. Oh, we must adapt. But the first rule of adaptation is to really understand both the nature of the risk and also be able to be prepared in advance so that we can handle the risk. And that's really about weather. When we at the Center for Science and Environment Outward have been looking at the issue of adaptation, the issue of preparedness in terms of weather forecast, in terms of good information that comes to the nation and then comes to the affected people is going to be one crucial part of what we mean by adaptation. Then, of course, there is much more to be done in terms of building the resilience, building the infrastructure, building systems so that we can respond to the risk. so that we can adapt. But the first critical issue is to understand the nature of the risk. And that really is something that we need, and all of us need to understand it much better. The science is changing very fast. We need to keep up with it, and we need to understand what is the scale of the preparedness that we have in this region, what do we need, so that we can respond faster. And that's really what Chris wrote and spoke about in our report, State of Africa's Environment, which we released yesterday. And we are privileged to have him today with us to be able to speak to us about his colleagues' new study on East Africa and what they have found. Chris, the floor is yours. Chris, the floor is yours.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you so much.
And thank you. I
may-
know that we're asking you
Can
to
you hear-
do this at a ridiculous time. I think it's midnight or beyond where you are. So thank you so much for doing this. Really grateful.
Yes. Oh, my pleasure. Yes. And I was up early this morning talking to my friends in East Africa. So, that's part of the way this all works. I'm going to stop my video just because I have a bad internet connection and I want to try to capitalize on it. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak. And I will start in. Let's see. And here we go. Okay, so I talk about climate change, Africa, early warning, and the media. And I've extracted, something from the wonderful report that you just released talking about climate change in Africa. And we all know a lot about all the big impacts in Africa, in South Asia, and other parts of the global stage of climate change. I'm really going to too much about that. It's going to really know that. Instead, I'm going to focus on really think about change and opportunities for prediction, and how to think about climate change empower us to anticipate risks. And the media plays an increasingly important role in this process, and in trying to share the media. So media plays a critical role in transmitting information to help safeguard lives and livelihoods. And so this talk may be a little bit technical, but I hope that you take that. In this, I think we all need to be full partners in understanding what's happening, particularly within all of our grasp. It's not that hard. I have written a book in 2022 called Fire, which was kind of written to this end where I tried to create a base where we describe a lot of the things we've been experiencing. And in that, I talked about the sort of usual aspects when we think about climate change, extreme heat, rain, cyclones, wildfires. But important underestimated hazards like El Niños, La Nina events, Indian Ocean dipole events, which tend to be, I think, underestimated avenues of risk of climate change, give us opportunity for prediction. And that really be the focus of my talk today. And, how we think about climate change is really important. I think we want to focus on climate change, but it's one important thing to focus on, which we can think about as persistent, predictable anomalies, like the five droughts that racked East Africa between late 2020 and late 2022. I think we want to think about how extra energy moves through the climate system. So climate change adds energy to the system, but we have tremendous capacity to track and predict where that energy and the moisture related to the energy is going. And we need to focus on the interaction between climate change and natural variations, and those give us opportunities for prediction. So this is a bit of background. There is a thing called the water circulation, which stretches across the globe along the equator and is associated with areas of really heavy rainfall. And in those areas, we see a sunny air. So kind of under normal conditions,
I think internet is internet at top. California.
Hotel California.
Yes, you're back.
Yeah, but it's really bad. I don't know about the it's really bad here.
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, you're back.
I'm sorry.
Come and take
Yeah.
photo.
I'm so sorry. It's so bad. Should I keep going?
Yes, please. We'll try as much as we can. Please.
Okay. I'm really sorry. It's super windy up here. I live in the mountains, and the internet is very bad. I apologize. Not much I can do. But I'll keep going. I'm really sorry. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, please go ahead, Chris. Perfect.
Okay. So we have the east-west circulation along the equator, called the Walker circulation, and when there's a La Nina event, we have a lot of enhanced rainfall in the area around Indonesia and dry subsiding air over East Africa. When there is an El Nino, the whole circulation shifts to the east, and over the central and eastern Pacific Ocean, we have really deep convection, and we can have abnormal rains over East Africa. And of course, there are connections in India and Colombia, many places in the world are affected by this. And we also have the Indian Ocean analog of this called the Indian Dipole, which in positive phase is associated with warmer than normal sea surface temperatures over the western Indian Ocean and really heavy rain over East Africa. And that's enhanced by cool sea surface temperatures in the eastern Indian Ocean. And part of my work is looking at how climate change is interacting with these well-known natural phenomena and intensifying.
Oh, no. Yeah. We ask you to revolt it and second to us.
Probably. That would be better. Like this, I'm not able to put any. So you can see, talk to certain center.
Chris, we're trying to figure out what to do.
Okay. Should I try to keep going?
Just wondering, it was very painful for you and for us. And
Okay.
So one option is, what I'm just wondering is, if you send us your presentation that you have, what we could do is to show that. Okay. And then if there are questions that the audience has, we could ask them to keep the questions and ask you. Would that be something that people try and do, because otherwise, it's tough for Chris, it's tough for all of us. So, why don't you email the presentation, Chris, to us, if that's possible?
Okay.
And we will simply just show it. And I know it won't be the same because we won't be able to explain anything. But once we showed it, then if people have questions, they can then ask you. There's another way of doing it is if you could record what you're saying and just send us a recording and we can play that. What would work better for you?
What if I just tried?
If you put Zoom on and just record what you're saying to us and just recorded it almost as you would be here, or you would be giving us the talk and then send it to us. Would that work?
Yeah, or what if I just I mean, I could just maybe pick a few key slides and describe those. How about that? And then
But now it's better.
I think maybe
Yeah, that would be better. People are agreeing with you. So yes, let's do that.
Okay.
Let's pick
Okay.
a few key slides and let's go ahead because I think everything else is even more complicated. Okay, so please.
Yeah. Okay. I think at this kind of late juncture. Okay. Let me do that. Let me just okay, this will be good for me. It's good practice to like think about what the most important things are. Okay, so, and I really am sorry for this. Hold on. Okay. This is really, I feel like I had better internet in like 1997 than I do right now. Okay, can you see my screen? Oh no, here we go.
No.
Okay. I'm just going to boil this down and I think try to get to the point. So can you see this slide here?
We can't see the screen yet.
Okay. It's coming. I'm going to do this next slide. And it's going to be great. Is this sharing?
No, Chris, maybe you need to log out and log in again. Now it's sharing.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
okay. The thing that I like to really, I think the most important thing that I want to communicate is shown by this simple graphic, which not necessarily easy to understand, but is kind of what I call a science haiku, in the sense that it packs information in a little space. And if we understand it, it's really important. What we're showing here is C-surface temperature anomalies that have been serious to go between, about -2 standardized anomalies plus 2 standardized anomalies. So that's kind of like a bell curve, Z-scores you might be familiar with. And it's a transcript from Western Indian Ocean on the axis across the Pacific on the right. Start in 1950 at the top and go to 2023 on the bottom. And I think this is a really important way to think about climate change. And here, as natural variability interacts with the warming of the oceans, we obviously see a lot of warming in the 2020s, in the 2010s. And we also see big movements in the Eastern Pacific, the Western Pacific, the Western Indian Ocean over time. So there's a real tendency to think of climate change as this sort of like abandonment of the atmosphere and ocean. And that's a very dangerous way to think about climate change because it causes us to remiss. And so, if about extreme heat events, right? We're all very comfortable thinking about heat waves. So really, loss of life. And of course, many other places experience heat waves, for instance. In the ocean, we also see these pockets of extreme warming, but different in the ocean is that they are very persistent, and also very, very predictable, very long lead times. And so, if we think about impacts on East Africa, we can kind of note some really important events, beginning with the 1997-98 storm El Nino. It was associated with in Somalia and many other places. There was a very strong in 2010 and 11. It was associated with famine in Somalia and the loss of more than 250,000 lives. Just incredible humanitarian disaster. For me, that was a very personal motivator to really focus a lot more on studying the kinds of impacts and trying to predict droughts. So that when in 2016-17, there was La Nina, and there was really extensive warming across the Indian and the Western Pacific Ocean, we were able to predict drought and help motivate humanitarian assistance. So it was quite big. We were able to predict the droughts in October, November, December, in about September, and the droughts in March, April, May, beginning in about December. And since that time, we have been working with the latest models, and we were able to predict the droughts in 2020, 2021, 2022 in about 8-month lead times. And so we see a real increase in our ability to make predictions. And
I need help from you now. I think we should just not continue. We'll ask Chris, and we will send everybody his present. I think that's.
Yeah, we will send the.
Okay, I think it's very late for him as well, not possible to ask him to do it.
Really sorry for this, but then no, is confirmed. So what we then will do is we'll request him to send the presentation, and we'll share it with all of you. And if you have any questions, we will connect you to him, or we can interact with him and get his answers. Can we move on to? Chris, can you hear us?
I'm back.
Yeah, can you hear us, Chris?
Yes.
Yeah, so we were just talking here. I think this is not working very well.
Okay.
There's a problem on the net. So is it possible for you to send me your the presentation, and I can share that with the people here, my journalist friends here, And if we have, and we certainly will have questions and issues that we want to answer, we can get back to you. Will that work?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm so sorry that this wasn't a more smooth presentation.
We completely understand, don't be bad about it, but yeah, Sunita, you wanted to say something.
I'm also thinking, Suparna, as Chris's presentation is very important.
Yes.
Let's send it to everybody, Chris. And then even when we are back in Delhi, if there is a need to ask you further questions, we could probably facilitate a small interaction and discussion with people with you there. And so that the answers can be given. And you can interact with everybody. So thank you again. And again, sorry about this. We were, internet and technology does fail us. So don't worry.
Yeah.
We will keep in touch with you. Your work is fantastic. So we're going to keep in touch with you. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll send a link to the raw PowerPoint tonight, and tomorrow I will create an MP4 with voiceover, and you can share that. But I won't do that tonight because I'll probably go to bed.
Of course, yes. I mean, thank you so much for agreeing to do this tomorrow. And we will send it on. Sukanya and Suparna will get back to you in case there is a need for further interaction, which I'm sure there will be. But thank you, Chris, and good night, and thank you for doing this.
Okay. All right. My apologies. I'm so sorry. All right.
Not at all.
Thank you. Thanks. And I just want to just really sincerely thank you for the tremendous work you're doing. One of the things I was going to talk about was how critical the role of the media is in all of this. So thanks for all your efforts.
Thank you, Chris, and good night.
Take care. Good luck.
It's very, very late for you. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Good night.
Sure thing. Good night.
So I think now there is going to be Amos who is going to give us this presentation.
Yeah, but just I think on the sense, the most workable arrangement is either when people are back, you can arrange another virtual meeting because I'm looking at the poor internet here.
Yes.
To listen to the MP4, it may not also work. The connection at the hotel is just very poor.
What we do is when we are back in Delhi,
you
come back to us after getting his presentation.
Yes.
And
then we can set up an interaction.
No convenient for everyone and him. So that, yes. And
can I just make his column is here.
Okay.
And Chris basically, after that 1985 famine in Ethiopia, the famine early warning system was set up. That's the world's first one. And the forecast the last famine and the ongoing famine also on the ground. And in his presentation, he was expected to make a comment of the what's happening now in El Nino. So that was important also in saying that. So there would be as Moina we are speaking, where El Nino kind of it not showing up. So please go through his presentation as well and the mechanism that he said, where he said that the La Nina is also changing due to climate change. So that's all.
I'm not so sure if there's a way to improve the network connectivity here because I have the report yesterday I was struggling, it's on and off.
What we'll do
and then you need to make reference to the report so that you can also ask questions.
We also constantly are looking to save money. So I was also telling Suparna, why didn't you print more copies and bring them for everybody? And then Suparna said, look, the cost of us printing it and then the cost of bringing the copies here. I mean, what we have done right now is to bring limited copies by each one of us, putting in some in our hand baggage, in our luggage. That's what we brought. But but forgive us because it is true. I also felt the same thing that you're feeling, that with this extraordinary work, I would like each one of you to go home with a copy in your hand because I don't know, I'm not very young. So I am still a print person. I like to open a page. I like to feel a page. And I believe I read something when I read a page. I'm not young. But Suparna, what is the best we can do? And I really would like this because I do believe that it's not fair to just say, download a copy. What can we do? Can we send PDF copies to everybody? Would that
Yeah, that's
help?
okay.
Would that be easier to?
Actually, it was working here. It's no problem. It's no problem
Yeah.
reading online, but the internet is something else.
Let's at least do one thing. It's a very heavy PDF file, but can we ask our office, can we ask?
Yeah, you get a low res.
Can we get a low-res
Yeah.
PDF file made?
We'll do that.
And we will email it to everybody today itself, okay? And then you also have, of course, the link to the report. It's free to download, so wherever you are, you can, and you have better internet, you can download it. But for the moment, we will send you a low-res PDF file. And if you do have the money, we will print it and send it to each one of you, okay? I mean, it's always a struggle. I mean, do we spend the money to bring all of you here and have an interaction? Do we have the money to print it and send it? And frankly, we felt that this interaction that we're having, and we haven't done something like this in a very long time. And I think this is invaluable, that we're seeing each one personally, meeting people, meeting new friends. And I think this is very good. So I'm glad we're doing that. It's recorded. It's fine. I'm now going to invite Amos and we will continue this conversation. So Amos, please, Power Shift Africa is one of the most important civil society groups in this region, across the world. So we're really honored to have you.
Thanks so much, Sunita.
It's fine, everyone, the view. They're not able to.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm being reminded.
Yeah, I know. I was forgot.
More. So, thanks so much, Center for Science and Environment, for inviting us, Power Shift, to be here to speak about climate and energy and development and the new report that we recently published. I'm also pleased to meet all of you friends who are always amplifying our voices in different spaces to make sure that we are keeping the narrative. There's power in a narrative, and we need to own our own African narrative. That is very important for us to be able to deal with the challenges of the continent, especially at the moment. I think there is power in developing an empowering narrative of the continent. So I'm very grateful to be here so that together we are able to shape the stories and the narratives that we want to be protected for our continent. So first, but yeah, I'm going to say that the next slide is about Africa's potential. Our continent is blessed with a huge potential. I was looking at the state of the Africa's environment report that was released yesterday. One of the things that came out clearly is about Africa's arable land. We have 65% of the world's arable land. When you look at our renewable energy potential, we have massive potential for solar. We have regions in Africa that have huge potential for wind. We have regions that have potential for geothermal. We have a useful population that offers us with immense human capacity So Africa is blessed with huge potential. But at the moment, we are also faced with challenges. And one of the challenges that the continent is faced with is the climate crisis. We are in a state of emergency all the time because when droughts are not affecting our communities, it's floods that are displacing them from their homes. We are losing lives and we are also losing livelihoods. And Sunita talked about the need for us to understand the nature of the risk and to be able to prepare so that every time we have extreme weather events, it doesn't have to translate to disasters. We have seen here in Kenya and across the Horn of Africa that every time we have droughts, it turns into famine. People are dying of hunger and starvation. It doesn't have to be that way. And that's why I think crisis presentation would be very important because it talks about prediction and early warning systems and preparedness so that we are able to help our people build adequate resilience to the challenge. But this requires resources. We know that investing in these systems will need financial resources. We will need the needed technologies. And we are also engaged in a crisis that is of globalness. The climate crisis is not just an African crisis. And we need global solidarity for us to be able to overcome the challenges that we face. And within the United Nations framework, we have various arguments that have been reached. One of them is the Paris Agreement. We have the Kyoto Protocol that provided a space for markets. And we have seen our international colleagues promise support, but the support has not been adequate, even though it is not even sufficient and they have not been coming. Now, the reason we produced the report on carbon markets is Africa needs financial resources to be able to build these resilient systems, to be able to build early warning systems, to be able to help our communities to adapt when the droughts come and the rains are failed and the agricultural productivity is going down. We will need financial resources. And instead of our international colleagues and friends fulfilling their promise, I think they have been pushing a lot on the issue of markets. And all of us know that we are in the climate crisis because of markets. We know what markets are out for. Markets are out for making profits and not helping people. A massive accumulation of wealth among a few at the expense of the rest. So if we are in this crisis because of the markets, how then can the markets help us find solutions? So markets are not the solutions. But last year at the climate summit, COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, there was the establishment of Africa Carbon Markets Initiative. One thing we need to understand that this is not the first markets initiative of the continent. Since Kyoto Protocol, we have had various market initiatives trying to provide markets as a solution to the climate crisis. And that triggered us to produce this report. Another element that triggered PowerShift Africa to produce this report is the Africa Climate Summit that happened in September. This summit was an opportunity for Africa to come, African leadership, including communicators, media, civil society, and everyone to come together to find a solution to the crisis that is biting the continent. And when the summit was framed around markets, we saw the need to produce this report. Because, like I already mentioned, we cannot be finding solutions to a challenge using the same mechanisms that got us to the problem. Previous market schemes, capital market schemes on the continent have not helped. They have not helped build resilience for the communities on the front line of the climate crisis. They have not helped cut emissions that have got us into this challenge. So definitely, this new initiative, when it was being launched, actually it was being promoted as an opportunity to unlock climate finance for the continent and create employment opportunities for the majority youthful population of Africa, and create opportunities for development and helping Africa end its many years of underdevelopment, but also helping Africa build resilience to the crisis. But that has not been the case with previous initiatives. Actually, the reality is that it's been the opposite. So,
Magnify the text if you can, just a bit.
I mean, it's Sukanya's problem, this trying to manage different levels. Let's Sukanya come, she's got a hand on us. Because she says that when she's broadcasting it, she's not able to fix it.
Okay.
There's some technology glitch here. So,
Okay.
we're trying to.
Okay, we can survive the pain, it's okay.
yeah, but that also gives you an opportunity to listen to things already what we projected. But you'll get the slides also, and if you go to PowerSheet Africa's website, you'll be able to get the report on the website. Yeah, I was saying that actually the contract is true. The previous initiatives are provided what they had promised. And in essence, actually, what carbon credits are, they're just pollution funds. They help polluters to continue polluting and feel good because they are throwing crumbs to communities on the front line of the crisis. So they are not a solution. They only permit, especially companies based in historically polluters and rich countries that have developed on the back of fossil fuels and pollution to be able to continue polluting and undermining the aspirations of our communities, while at the same time abusing our communities because they just throw at them little money to continue polluting and putting them into more vulnerable situation. The reason I'm saying so is that I began by saying Africa is faced with a crisis that it needs to adapt to, and we will need resources. But these resources does not have to continue helping polluters to continue polluting. Africa has not contributed very much to the emissions that have got us into this challenge. But you see, what Africa needs to do is to avoid emissions. We do not have emissions to cut. But as we develop, we need to avoid developing on the pathway of the historical polluters that has got us on this trajectory that is dangerous, that is threatening our lives and our livelihoods. So you cannot transfer responsibility of cutting emissions to a society, to a people who have not contributed actually to the emissions. So what essentially polluters are doing with the carbon markets and credits is transferring the responsibility of cutting their emissions.
Can you use this for cutting
It's
We have to be for this session.
We need an opportunity
Yeah. For interaction. So because I think so I think another 10 minutes and then we
can open up
can
for.
open up for discussions.
So what also the markets do is they disaggregate resources and promote market development. You see, we need resources to be able to help our community to adapt. But what they do is we have middlemen who are involved in the markets business. Instead of resources going to communities, much of the resources end up with consultancies, private developers, these middlemen who are engaged in the market schemes. So, clearly this is a misallocation of resources. We need to have resources going into communities, the communities that are suffering the challenges of the crisis, and not carbon entrepreneurs who participate in the value of the carbon markets. The carbon markets are a new form of colonialism. What do I mean by that? We all of us know colonial tendencies that see countries in Africa as empty lands and spaces that need to be developed, or that needs to be colonized, that needs to be acquired. This is actually what the schemes do. We have communities that are depending on these land resources and land-based resources that are important. And what the markets do is they alienate these communities from utilizing these resources as they seek to consolidate conservation areas for credits. They also promote activities that do not support indigenous community ways of livelihood, their lifestyle. And some of these activities might include large-scale growth of commercial forests, for example, for credits. And this drives these communities away from their lands. It takes the power away from communities from using their land because the market trades it with the power. What we have seen also with the market is they lead to land grabs. And there are several examples that we can cite here in Kenya. We have also seen communities being driven away from their lands for conservation purposes with the aim of acquiring credits. A case in point was the Tenwell community that was driven out of their land and is documented by Amnesty International in 2019 in the forest because they wanted to conserve that forest for carbon markets. So they undermine the land rights of communities. And most of these communities are the same communities that are suffering the challenge of the crisis. So instead of helping the communities be resilient to the crisis, they make them even more vulnerable because they are being driven out of their homes, the lands, the ancestral lands that they have not, on which they depend for survival, into new territories that they are not familiar with, or their lifestyle does not allow them to be able to live and survive comfortably in those environments. This makes them even more vulnerable. We have also seen such schemes take away land for conservation purposes, and this undermines food security and food sovereignty We have seen communities not being allowed even to graze their livestock in conserved areas. And these areas are condemned for the purpose of earning credits. So essentially, the schemes are not a solution to the climate crisis. Neither are they a solution to helping Africa meet its sustainable development goals. They are not also going to help Africa meet its Agenda 2063 that is all about helping the people of Africa to prosper. Markets are not an avenue for this kind of prosperity that the continent wants. What does the continent want? The continent wants genuine partnerships and engagement. What does these genuine partnerships and engagement mean? I think Africa needs huge amounts of resources to be able to build resilience, but also for mitigation. And it's estimated that adaptation costs could reach up to $50 billion per year by 2050, and about $1.5 billion per year by between 2026 and 2030. Where are we going to get these resources? And these resources need to go into systems such as renewable energy systems that are able to power our agricultural production so that Africa becomes food sovereign. I was reading in the State of the Environment report that despite Africa having 65% arable land, it still imports 85% of its food. But what will it take for Africa to be able to produce its own food and be food sovereign? It requires investments in local systems, such as renewables, that are able to power irrigation schemes, for example, when the droughts fail, that are able to help Africa to not just to be a supplier of raw materials, but also to process its produce. These renewables are able to power households and power health systems, power education, and empower our people so that we have capacity to be able to develop. What Africa actually should be calling for is not markets and carbon credit schemes. Africa should be calling for a fair share of climate finance from rich countries that have developed on the path of pollution. Africa should also be calling for the cancellation of unfair and illegitimate tax. And this will free resources for Africa to be able to invest in its resilience, to invest in avoiding emissions. We have seen some of the facilities that come on the continent, including the Just Energy Transition Partnership that was extended to South Africa at COP26 in Glasgow. Much of the investment plan, when you look at it, it comes in form of loans that's going to further put the African continent in debt. That's not what we want. We do not want Africa to continue owing the world based on this unfair cooperation, where we have polluters who have put us in a vulnerable situation, continuing to benefit from our very sorry and sad state. And the climate science is very clear that we need to ambitiously and take bold decisions and bold steps to cut emissions. And we have a limited time for us to be able to do so. So we cannot waste our precious time with solutions that are not real solutions to the challenge such as carbon markets. Solutions that are not going to help us to ambitiously cut our emissions. We need to invest in real solutions. And real solutions is we need to ask historic polluters, rich countries, to first of all cut their emissions. They shouldn't be investing in fossil fuel systems at this time when the world is faced with a danger. They should also help colonies such as Africa, which needs to develop, but doesn't need to follow the pathways that have led us to the challenge. To be able to develop in a cleaner way, to be able to develop in a way that helps it avoid emissions. They shouldn't be drawing Africa into the distractions of markets that are not working. I think I'm open for continued interaction. In the interest of time, I'll give the mic back to Sunita.
Thank you very much, Amos. That was excellent. Thank you. So what I will do is let me give my presentation, which will actually reiterate a lot of what Amos said, but from a recent investigation that we have done. We have published two recent reports, which I will talk about. One is in latest issue of Down to Earth. It's the cover story called Discredited. It is investigation rather than expose into the carbon markets and how they are working in India. This has been also followed up with a report which is they are both available on our websites for download, but Discredited, which is a detailed report on the carbon markets and how they work. Now, as Amos explained, carbon markets is not bad as an idea. Because from my perspective, Amos and I may have some variance in what we are saying, but I think we both agree as a tool, it's a good tool. If you were to use the markets to drive investments in our part of the world, where we seriously need to upscale investments in renewable energy technologies and high-end technologies to make the transition to a low carbon future. So the question is not the market. And I'm saying this because since our report has come out, there has been this usual chatter from the carbon market people saying, oh, these crazy people, they don't like markets and they're just, they're against the carbon market. No, we're not against the carbon market. We just don't think that the current framing of the carbon market is working for people or for the planet. And we are basically finding that this is not the way that we want governments, particularly in Africa and Asia, to be able to discuss the role of the carbon market going forward. So what is it that we found? Let me give you a quick presentation. These are, as I said, the two reports that you will find on our website. I want to put the screen over here. Fine. Is that okay? We call it the Men in Black. This is like the film Men in Black. So we say carbon markets have the potential to unlock investment for low carbon transition. We are not saying carbon markets as a word is bad. Now, under the Kyoto Protocol, the CDM, the Clean Development Mechanism, was set up to issue credits, but its design was flawed. It became very quickly what we call the cheap development mechanism. Not the clean development mechanism, but the cheap development mechanism. Now, at COP28 in Dubai, the world will discuss Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. This is an article where governments have to now agree on the rules for a carbon market. The rules could be bilateral, the rules could be global. Currently, what exists in the world and what Amos talked about is what is called a voluntary carbon market. And the reason this is important to understand, because this market and how it is operating will be used by governments to make the rules for an official market. Two, we are seeing particularly, and I will explain and show you how in Africa, there is now a deep concern amongst governments about how they need the money, but how this money is coming at the cost of its own economy, its own people. So this is why this investigation was important. We did the investigation in India, but firstly, as Amos said, this is a fairly sophisticated ecosystem of the carbon markets, how it operates. This is the voluntary carbon markets. You have a register, the main item here, keep in mind, is what is called a project developer. A project developer could be anybody. Could be somebody who has cook stoves and wants to develop a program to go and sell cook stoves or distribute cook stoves in villages. Could be a renewable energy company, could be anybody. This is the project developer. Then you have an ecosystem in which the project developer has verifiers and auditors, very fancy men in suits who are required to go out and verify, audit whether the program is working, whether the program is legitimate, whether it should qualify for credits. Once the verifier validates the project, it gets registered. The registry, there are largely 5 registries in the world. 3 of them are based for our part of the world. One is Vera, based in Washington, set up by large corporations. The other is Gold Star, which is set up in somewhere in Europe, I think Switzerland, which is largely being created by conservation groups like WWF and others. And now we have a new registry coming out of the Middle East, which has not had any projects yet. So the registry is the one which accepts the project and then issues the credits. These credits, 1 ton, so 1 credit is equivalent to 1 ton of carbon abated. Okay, so the number of credits that are issued are for the number of tons of carbon that are abated by the project. These credits are then valued in terms of the cost of the credit. Now that price is not known. And that's important to understand that we have no idea about the price. But this is then the way it works. You have an end buyer. Now the end buyer could be an airline company that says, if you in fact travel by plane now, you will see that you get these sort of tickets that say so many tons of carbon neutralized, and that we are a carbon neutral company. Or you will get a Gucci bag. Gucci is very much in the news on this. You buy a Gucci bag and Gucci will say, oh, this bag that you're buying is carbon neutral. Why? Because we have bought credits, and these credits have been bought from the project developer. So that's how this market works. If you look at the annual transactions of the voluntary carbon market last year, they were 2 billion. Okay, and the number of carbon credits, and we've done this to explain, we did this obviously for India, but we've also we had to understand the entire global ecosystem and what was happening in Africa to put this report together. You will see here the number of carbon credits issued. Now, these are the projects that are issued for agriculture, okay, which is largely methane reduction, that I have methane coming out of my rice fields, and so I will reduce my methane with the technology called wet and dry. Then you have chemical processes. Interestingly, you will see in our report, anything which is chemical processes and others which are expensive, like carbon capture and storage, where the cost is higher, is only in the developed world. In our part of the world, the projects are forestry and land use, where you grow trees and you get credits for it. Community and household, which is largely 2 technologies, distributing low emission improved cook stoves and distributing biogas plants in poor households. Renewable energy is the maximum projects that are done, and largely, if you see here, India has 46% of the world share of renewable energy projects. And I will explain to you what a ridiculous mess this is. Okay, but that's the way the projects are. This is what the carbon offset market is putting out. Oh, sorry, it's gold standard and not gold star. Sorry, thank you. Thank you. Okay, the Indian market is this you don't have to concentrate on. I just want to tell you how difficult it was for my colleagues to put together this number. Nothing is available. This is a market which preaches market principles. Nothing is available. When we started our investigation, we did not have a list of Indian projects. The government of India does not have a list of Indian projects. Nobody has a list. We had to go to every website, download by each project name and make a database. We then came up with this number that we have a substantial number that we need to deal with. As I said, the only rule of this market is secrecy. The only rule. As journalists, as researchers, this was a fascinating research project for us. There was no database. Individual companies made contracts to sell credits. They said they're under a confidentiality clause. There was no idea where the project sites are. There is no information on the beneficiaries, no information on the price. We then made a database. We then contacted the project developers and we were still blocked. You will be fascinated. We finally went to 40 locations, 5 project categories, 4 states. We looked at all these different categories and I will talk about it. But what was fascinating, and you have to understand this, I mean, I'm basically a journalist, whatever else I am. And so for me, every time somebody says, I cannot give you information, I'm like, oh, there's something here. So one project developer told us they cannot take us to these Indian village sites, Indian villages, okay? Because these villages are too unsafe for you to go. Like, I'm Indian. I know India as well. I know what, and a young reporter works under Richard. A young woman reporter was traveling in these villages. And yet we were being told by this French company, Paris-based investor company, in an email we were told, you cannot go to these Indian villages because it is unsafe for you. Then we were told by other developers that if they shared information with us of just the name of the project site, we would have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. An NDA. We were like, what is this? What is this market which has so much to hide? And then our biggest developer called EKI wrote to us officially because we badgered them, asking them for comments, please tell us. And we said we're going to press, and if you don't give us a comment, we will say that you have nothing to comment. They actually wrote to us saying that we are in, I don't think we quoted it over yes, at this point, the company is in a silent period and we will not be able to respond. I mean, as reporters, this is delicious. I cannot tell you any other word. This is absolutely delicious. I mean, when the company writes to you and says, we are in a silent period, I'm like, wow. So we finally did go. My colleagues, they're not here to share this with you, but 2 colleagues of ours actually did go to the project sites. Fascinating. So the improved food stocks is one of the biggest issues where I'm not sure in Africa, but in Asia, and I know in Africa also these are taken off in a very big way. So the improved food stores are essentially food stores that are given by companies to villagers, and they count the amount of carbon that will be reduced because people have reduced the amount of wood that they have used for the burning of for cooking their food. Now, the first thing we found was that in most cases, and this is bizarre, in most cases, the developer was counting the amount of carbon dioxide reduced by just the fact that they had gifted a cook stove to a villager. Now, even a kindergarten kid will tell you, and I'm sure it's the same in Africa, that a gift of a free cook stove does not translate into the use of the free cook stove. Okay? Because you and I know that traditionally villagers cook on cook stoves in a particular way. They have a cook stove where they use wood, but they need to use it with the utensils that they are used to. Also, if you will see this poor woman that we have put here, who was interviewed, the government of India has a scheme called Ujjwala, under which the Prime Minister's, it's a very good scheme because the Prime Minister has asked the middle classes of India to give up the subsidy on LPG, saying that they will give it to poor women. So then they use LPG for cooking their food. Now the cylinder, you will see her sitting with the cylinder. Okay. Now they're poor people, so they can't buy a refill for the cylinder. But as all households do, and I'm sure they do it in Africa as well, they're wise people. So they use the cylinder and the cook stove and the LPG to boil water, or to boil something which requires, quick energy. Then they use their traditional cook stove, and as one after the other we found, then people were using this cook stove, the so-called improved cook stove, was hardly being used. But these emissions have already been calculated and avoided and reduced. It's a big issue. And people have then got a Gucci bag saying, oh, that cook stove has reduced these emissions. So that's how the market works, and we reported on it. We also reported on the fact that what was the price of this whole thing and who's benefiting from it. And you will see in this price, essentially, even if they are given a free cook stove, and you look at the carbon credits that the company earns on the life of, which is 5 to 7 years, the villagers get a fraction of the carbon credits. Fraction, peanuts. The money is shared between the developer, the registry, and the verifier. So it's a closed club which is earning the money in the name of that poor community which is supposedly getting a cook stove. We then went to look at planting trees in a valley called the Araku Valley in East India, Southeast India. This is the project which is funded by something called a livelihood fund, which is set up by a multinational company called Danone, which is a food company. We have all heard about it. So Danone set up livelihood fund. Livelihood fund in turn contracted out a local engineer who has gone and supplied saplings to people to plant trees. And this project, the trees that have been planted under this project or other projects, all the poor villagers have been asked to sign, which they did not know anything about. But we found it in the project document, a document that says we have signed an agreement through Nandi Foundation, acting on behalf of Danone, to give away the full right to the carbon credits from the trees planted. So the trees and the carbon credits, the rights over that has been signed over to Danone Livelihood Foundation. And this is for 20 years, they have given up the rights. Now, what is the basic issue we found in this? Two issues of additionality and community benefits. We found that these trees, which were planted by people through the free saplings given, were given both by this Nandi Foundation, but also by government agencies. Now, how do you take the benefit of this and say that this benefit is coming only to the project? Two, we have basically found that the communities get nothing out. The only benefit that the poor community has got is the free sapling that they have got, that they have planted on their land. If you look at the calculation, and you see that on top, based on a conservative price of $8 per credit, the total would be 12.8 million in years, roughly 100 crore Indian rupees. The villagers only got a free sapling. Now, what we have found is from the documents that Michelin Group, which is a tire company, has claimed offsets of its employees travel from this project. Avian, which is the water company, which you know of, the Avian water, the luxury water, has claimed carbon neutrality based on planting trees in Assam. Now, we don't know what is the price the carbon credit sold. We only know from the website of Livelihood Fund that they have investors, and those investors can claim carbon credits against the trees that they have planted in Aranthalath. The question is, what are people getting for this? Why is this credit scheme not benefiting people? The other one we looked at, and I won't get into this, these projects are just starting off, but you will read about it, is the methane reduction in rice fields. But I want to talk about biogas plants, because this to me is really about the irony of what we are seeing in our world, where the poor are subsidizing the rich, always. So in biogas plants, we have 200 household biogas projects which have been registered with Verra and Gold Standard. 50 projects are from India, so you can imagine 150 projects, another 100 are probably in Africa, and 50 are in Latin America. They have collectively generated in India 4 million credits. Now, the question again was, and this is very important, I want to spend a minute for you to understand this. So, these biogas plants that you will see in this photograph have been paid. In fact, this one that we found was actually paid by the Madhya Pradesh, that is, the state government had subsidized the building of this plant. The villager, the poor villager that you can see here, he paid for the rest of the plant. Okay? The carbon credit, the cost of the biogas plant, would earn between $16 to 56 a year for 7 years. If you look at this, now this is an important issue, because in the case of tree planting, the money was not being shared with people. In the case of biogas plant, the cost of the capital of the biogas plant can never be paid by the carbon credits market. So essentially what you're doing is, as a developer, I am saying I have built a biogas plant, I have paid a small fraction of the cost to the community. The community has spent their hard money. The state governments in India, which are cash-strapped, have spent money to build the biogas plant, and I have taken credit for it and sold that credit to a company. Am I making sense? Okay, this is what we found. So what we say here, the credits being taken by rich polluters are being done on the backs of the poorest. Actually, it is the poor who are subsidizing the rich when it comes to this. Then let's look at the renewable energy projects. I said 50% are in India. Fascinating. So we all say renewable energy very important. Let's use the markets to fund renewable energy. I totally agree with that. But what is happening here? The largest share in India is renewable energy. Please look at this data very carefully. Carbon credits issued to renewable energy are a fraction of the project cost. So what you're seeing here, just look at this table. Forget the first one, which is a hydroelectric plant, which has a very long year, and there are a lot of other reasons. Look at all the other renewable energy, the solar project, the solar voltaic, the wind-based project. These are the capacity, the total cost of the project, the estimated reduction of emissions, CO2 emissions. This is the potential cost that this is the money that they will earn based on the cost of the carbon credit in the first crediting period. It's 3% of the capital cost of the project. It is 4% of the capital cost of the project. Now, the question I have, this is the first time, because in the Western media, when you see these reports, they talk about additionality. I talk about this to say, you're actually ripping us off, because you're not paying the cost of the renewable energy project, but you're taking credit for it, and you're saying that you have offset your emissions. If you really want to offset your emissions, then please pay the right price for it. You can't rip us off and then still take credit for it. That's the point that we made in our report. So what is our conclusion in this report? Please read the first one. We are basically saying that the entire purpose of the market seems to be to serve the interest of the retinue of project developers, auditors, and others who make profit out of this business. This market is not about mitigating emissions. The entire purpose of the voluntary carbon market is only to serve the interests of the auditors, the developers, and all the paraphernalia of. In fact, it could end up increasing emissions in the world. Why? Because, say, an airline company or an oil company says that we have bought offsets, but those offsets are really not real. In the case of renewable energy, it's a fraction of the cost. In the case of biogas plants, you are actually claiming the biogas plant credit when you have not paid for it. In the case of cook stoves, you are overestimating the reduction of emissions. So the company which have bought the credits would continue to emit. It would say, please keep flying because this is carbon neutral. But you really don't have any evidence. And in fact, our research and investigation shows there is no way you can claim that these projects have reduced emissions. So we say that these credits are overestimated, and this is a double jeopardy. I have a lot more in terms of the agenda, but I know I'm short of time, and I know all of you will have questions. This is all on our website, and but I'll just give you the headlines. So we've said the agenda has to be ensured transparency. The most important agenda is put a price on carbon credits, which is for real change. The Rwandan government has come up with a very good proposal of saying nothing below $30 per ton will be accepted for the carbon credit market. We are saying this is a very good starting point. Okay? We cannot have this market fraction the cost and claim carbon credits. We are saying do not shorten people or the planet. Please share proceeds with the people. Now, who's here from Zimbabwe? Okay. You really have to tell me what's happened in Zimbabwe. Fascinating. Brilliant proposal by your government to say, share the proceeds with people. We are nationalizing the credits. We don't like you. You're doing wrong for Zimbabwe. Brilliant first proposal by the government just last July or June. Okay. And then within 3 months, the government buckles down and says, okay, give us 30%, and we don't care what you give to communities, the rest of it, you and the developer agree with the community. Now, it's very clear, and I'm not blaming the government, it's very clear the pressure of the developers is to pay. These are very rich, powerful people who put pressure. But I will tell you, and please look at our magazine, we have tracked every government and the work area. The Kenyan government, as you know, is coming up with the law. The Rwandan government has said $30. Zimbabwe has now come up with the 30-70 rule. The Nigerian government has come up with another proposal. So governments in this region are beginning to step up their game. And they need us to investigate what's happening so that they get more power to their elbow as they push back these companies, because these companies are very powerful. We were very excited when we saw the original Zimbabwean proposal. We are also saying all the king's men, it's really a Humpty Dumpty, okay? So we're saying keep these people out of the game. They cannot even calculate emission reductions. So they are just completely, all these men in suits, they're just not worth it. They're adding to the cost of the project, and they are making projects unviable, and they cannot even add up. They are as silly, as stupid as that. And the last one, and this is very important for all of you, and important for us, is in whose credit will these carbon credits go? So see, when the Kyoto Protocol was signed, it was agreed that there was a group of countries which had created the problem they needed to reduce, and we, in our part of the world, would trade, and the market would help us to move ahead. Under the Paris Agreement, all countries have emission reduction targets under the nationally determined contribution. India, for instance, has an has to reduce its emission intensity of its economy. We have to augment our non-fossil fuels to meet 50% of electricity by 2030. We have to plant additional forests for carbon sinks. But we have already signed 675 renewable projects for 268 million tons of CO2 equivalent. So whose account will they go into? India or the company that they have been sold to? And now if India claims it, it will be double accounting. The tree plantation is being done, most trees will be planted outside the forest. How will this get counted? And the worst thing is that suppose we have now sold these. We have sold our cheapest options to the rich polluters. We will be left with more expensive options, which we will not be able to afford, and so we will continue to do. So this is really why we are saying the bottom line is design carbon markets to work for planet and people, and that the current voluntary carbon market is not working. I hope that makes sense. Thank you. So questions to Amod and me?
Now, there's a slide.
What is it? Sorry, I get the mic to you.
Thank you, Sunita. You have been a great superstar. Keep it up. Yeah, I just want Amos to listen to what I'm going to say, but I'm also appealing to your ears, Sunita. There is a slide. Can you go back to slide?
Yes.
Show?
Yes. Tell me which one you want me to open.
Yeah, just go until you back until I tell you to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, but almost from the end.
It is sorry. Let me go. Just open it. Yeah. Tell me which one. Then I think this.
I think after Men in Black.
After Men in Black is right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead. Next.
Yeah.
Next. 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 I think we are going to the end, isn't it?
No, that's along with
Next.
then we have all these projects.
Yes, next. Next again. Next. There you are. So Amos and Sunita, would you want to say a little bit more about this slide, about these conclusions? And I would want to start with Amos. That Amos, you did a research and you published a book or a report on the same. If you look at this slide, does it reflect anything close to you? What is the nearness of this slide to the reports that you have?
Amos. So how relevant is this that our conclusions are to your report in Africa? That is the question.
Yeah, our report establishes that the carbon markets, one, it benefits the middlemen.
Yes.
And not the communities. They should be benefiting from the schemes. And I think Sunita has very clearly elaborated on that it's the project developers, it's the verifiers that are benefiting from this project, but also the polluters feel good that our products are carbon neutral, when in very sense they are not. And the money that goes now to the end user, who is mostly our communities, or the people that have developed renewable energy projects, including our governments, is very little. So it's not benefiting the community, it's not benefiting our agenda of being able to invest in alternative development pathway systems such as renewables that can help us build resilient. But rather, it's just helping the pollutant for feeling good and polluting.
Yeah, so are we basically saying that carbon trade is a hoax?
In the current, I would say yes, it's a hoax in the current voluntary carbon market, both the investigation by Carbon Trade in Africa and the investigation by CSET in India. We are saying the voluntary carbon market is based on overcrediting, shady deals which are not working for people or the planet. You would agree with that? It's a hoax in that respect.
Just an addition. Even the compliance ones, the compliance markets like the EU ETS.
We haven't looked into that yet.
Yeah.
So I'm very careful about what we speak in terms, if you have looked into it, you give your, we have looked into the voluntary carbon market. We are now investigating the compliance markets. And I hope we can give you a better story, but I doubt it.
Yeah, we've been looking at also
Yes,
the
good.
ETS, and one of the things, the emissions that they have promised to cut, they have not been able to fulfill that promise. So I don't think carbon markets will be able to help us. So this has talked about the price. A country like Rwanda being able to propose a higher price. I don't think the polluters are able to pay the price.
But that's not the point. I think, I think this is where unity will count. So Rwanda says $30, but let's say Zimbabwe says, I'm willing to sell it to you for $20. Obviously, it's going to go for 20. And suppose India says, oh, these African nations, we will sell it for 12. Okay, it's gone. But suppose the world agrees, and I really strongly believe in this, Amos. We've been arguing for this all the way from CDM. Okay, we're saying put a floor price to the carbon trade. Okay, put a floor price. And I was so happy to see for the first time that the Rwandan government at least has put it on paper. It's the first government in the world which has had the courage to at least put it on paper. Then let's have a floor price. Now you can agree that $30 is too low. You could want to do it 35, 40, but it's a very good point. But that requires all countries which are going to be doing carbon trading to agree to that floor price. You can't undercut it. Okay? Because this is what happened in the case of CDM. So the entire bundle of clean development mechanism money went to India and China. Why? Because we had the cheapest emission reduction possibilities. Now, if African governments say, oh, but we have so much forest, we are willing to sell this to you for $1. Why should we care? Okay, then this is what you will see. But if they go together and say, no, we will put a floor price, and that floor price is for all of Africa. And India says, no, we will agree with this, also for India. And all the other countries, because largely the market is Latin America, South America, India, Bangladesh, not even so much, India and Africa. So if we can do that, I think it's a huge game changer. They will, if they can't pay, they can plant trees in their backyard.
Yeah. So, okay. Now, I just want to bring this mic so that the floor can also participate. But my last question to the two of you. Do you know anybody who is your sparring partners, the other side, the ones who don't believe in what you are saying?
Everyone.
I'm looking for just one great speaker like the two of you.
So we tried to contact them when we did our meeting, because quite frankly, Suparna is always trying to bring different voices. We want you to hear, we always believe that it's different voices. They refuse to come onto platforms. So we have our biggest, the biggest proponents of this would be, if you can reach them, would be the two registry heads, Gold Standard and Vera. You should try and reach the big developers. In fact, I did have a slide and I removed it, but it's in our book. The top developers in the world is listed here. Any one of them. You should try and bring in some of the big proponents and champions of carbon markets. Though I can see that they are changing their words. I think they're all learning to be. I saw Ajay Banga of the World Bank now saying, oh, the markets are not working and we should get them to rework for people. I can see that there is, but I think the real hardcore voices would be the registry. When we tried to reach, as I said to you, all the people, because Down to Earth cannot publish without having the other side comment. And you saw the bizarre response we got. We're in a silent period.
Maybe as a just here, can add that for those of you you can try to reach out to NRT.
NRT, which is?
Not very Land Trust.
Question.
Yes.
My name is Petroni Manasseh. I write for Down to Earth, India, or Kenya. Now, from your explanation, the partnership guys have done a little important. But I'm just wondering, now that Africa has these big forests and spaces that are not cultivated, the carbon market guys are telling us that these are some of the best spaces for the actors' carbon sinks. What is the alternative now that you guys are demonizing these markets? And we told that the source of climate finance now that we have issues for the notorious polluters. I'm just wondering, what else can we do as an alternative? Use these spaces.
You go and then I will go.
Yeah, for your information, I think I wanted just to say Liberia is losing about 10% of its territory to blue carbon and Dubai-based developer. And I think we shouldn't be losing our territories because of the being able to contribute the challenge that we have least contributed to. I mentioned in my presentation that what we should be doing is we need to invest our little resources. We need to seek for partnerships that help us invest in renewables. And this should not be based on us offsetting pollutants. They already owe us a responsibility, having developed the back of emissions, to be able to help us to develop but in a cleaner way. So we should protect our forests for the indigenous people to continue using, the people who depend on the forest communities to continue using these forests to build their resilience. But also, Sunita mentioned the issue of double accounting. Our governments are already using some of these forests as their nationally determined contributions to the Paris process. If we are going also to use them for offsetting rich countries and companies that are continuing to pollute, I think we will not be helping solve the problem, but we'll just be compounding the problem that we are facing.
Slightly different response. So Africa has a lot of land and you have a lot of areas under forests. But those forests are not wilderness areas. Those forests are habitats of your people. They are important resources for your countries. So my view would be a slightly different formula to Amos, not very different, but slightly different. I would argue let Kenya renegotiate with Blue Planet, demand renegotiation, do it like Zimbabwe did. Nationalize it first. Because they nationalized it, there was a lot of hue and cry. And then the Zimbabwean government came up with a brilliant proposal, which they kind of diluted to some extent, but still they tried hard. I would ask the Kenyan government to renegotiate and do it the following. One, set the price much higher. Say that our carbon credits from our forests can only be sold at, say, $40 a ton of carbon sequestered each year for the next 20 years. Okay. Now you have a bill which is much higher that will come in. Then you look at how the proposal from the Zimbabwean government, which basically said how much of that money will come to government and how much of the money will go to directly to the community and how much of it can you keep for your project development. Okay, so I would come up with a formula which says, let me as a government, because it is a resource of mine, let me earn certain money out of it, which I can then invest into doing more stuff. But most importantly, let the communities on the ground get, in my view, at least 50% of the project of the carbon credits, at least 50%. And I say this for a very clear reason. I'm asking that poor community not to go into the forest and light a fire to it. I'm asking that poor community not to go and cut a tree that they need for their firewood needs. I'm asking that poor community to keep that forest because I need it for a global interest. Okay? That community needs to be paid every year for the labor in the land that they are investing in protecting that forest. And that money has to go into their bank account directly. Then they have an interest to say, okay, this tree, I'm earning carbon credits out of it. I am not earning, I don't need it for charcoal. I will keep it for carbon credits. And the money I get from it, I will go and invest in paying higher for the charcoal or buy an improved bookstore. So my formula for carbon market would be, and I know this will never get accepted, because accepting it means that the polluters have to start paying the true price of the offsets. Okay? But I'm challenging the rich polluters, saying, if you really want the offset market, then pay us the price that you require. And please remember, planting a tree in the US or in Europe will still be more expensive than planting it in Africa, even at $40 per ton of carbon sequestered. So our formula is slightly different, Amos, which we are demanding. And I know it's a demand which they will never accept. But I need to check. If I say to them, you're terrible and that, we don't like the carbon markets, they will say, oh, you just go down. But if you say to them with data, with facts, with information, then see, you're being a fraction of that solar energy cost project. And you're taking credit for, in the case of biogas, that poor person is actually subsidizing your rich consumption. This is completely immoral. So my formula to the Kenyan government would be slightly different.
Okay, Kadisha. The human rights thing, you find that some of these schemes drive away communities who have lived in these forests for a very long time. I think even as we need a formula of paying the correct price, but also we should not be driving communities from the lands that they have been in to conserve those areas.
But because their choice, I would challenge you, Amos. It's my choice. I'm a poor community. I'm getting paid a good amount of money, and I'm being told go live outside. I mean, the fact is, don't undermine my labor and my costs, and don't undermine my choice. Okay, but at least in Africa, it's going to play out very differently. Your issue is really large areas. I'm sorry, you have someone behind you. We need to keep this happening. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Helen Seda. I'm a journalist from The Standard. My question is to Amos specifically. There is so much interest and hype on this carbon trading in Kenya, and even the government has caught up in it to the point that there's even a policy that has been developed and the same to help the structures and just to get the things right in the same. Here you are, you're starting to build this counter narrative. So I'm just asking, how can we as journalists start, build and sustain this counter narrative that carbon markets and trading are a false solution and they are gaps that need to be addressed. Thank you.
In addition to that, just my apologies for holding the timer. In addition to what she's saying, PowerShift, when you look at your report, it's like you are anti this thing completely, but it looks like it's a losing battle. How don't you just soften a bit and sort of advise the government?
I'm not soft. I'm not soft. Don't call me, there are two words I hate, soft and pragmatic.
So how
I'm neither
about-
soft nor am I pragmatic, I'm tactical, I'm
Exactly.
strategic. I know I will not win the battle this way, but I need to win it. So I will win it in a different way.
Actually, that's my point. PowerShift should actually adopt this position whereby they sort of let's embrace this carbon credit markets, but tell them to be actually not to oversell it like you said, because they seem to be selling it to be like the only solution. Yet it doesn't look like there's so much into it. They just look at it as one of the solutions. Maybe that's.
I think it's a question of tactics, that's all. I love the report that Kashi put out, which was, but it came out of the region, it was very strategic. When PowerShift put out the report, we got it, and we sort of sat up in Delhi because it happened in the week. Sorry, I cannot stop this. Sorry for being so rude. So it came out, I thought they were so clever. They came out with the report at the time that the climate week was happening, the summit was happening. And it was a brilliant report. But yes, I think we'll all learn. It's fine, we'll all learn. We all, their report helps us to take a point of view. We all work together, and these are different points of view which reinforce each other. We will keep at it. I think your question at the back is something that is fascinating. You see, we need to understand the Kenyan government policy a little more. My colleagues are now looking at it also. Look forward to Amos also coming back, because there is pressure on the governments to find a way to regulate the markets. Now, personally, I'm not against it at all. If the Rwandan government can have a national law that says $30 and nothing will do. If the Zimbabwean government can have a law which they have now notified, and I will hope that you will write about it and get them to re-notify it. So say, go back to your original proposal, brilliant proposal, that give 30%, or the Zimbabwean government proposal was only 30% of the proceeds should go to the project development. 70% of the proceeds should be with the national government and the community. Now, I don't know what the Kenyan government has done, so we have noted it in our report that the Kenyan government is working on a proposal for carbon credits. And yesterday, the head of NEMA told me that yes, we've just notified it. And I promised I will take a look at it as well. We need to understand what governments are doing without sort of blanking it out and saying this is bad. But we need governments to ask for more. I am telling you, if African governments do not put the pressure on regulating this market, on asking for more, this market will happen, and it will happen at the cost of people, and it will happen at the cost of climate. So I'm very happy that the Kenyan government has stepped up, but I can't tell you whether I'm happy enough to tell you it's a good policy.
Yeah, I'll just add on what Sunita said in response to your question, Helen. The thing is, yes, we are revising our act actually to accommodate issues of carbon markets regulation. And I do agree with you, Sunita, that it's good to have such frameworks in place. And the questions I think journalists should be asking, the issue that we have presented in our reports, and those flaws that come with carbon markets. How are these regulations helping address those issues that we have highlighted in our report, the flaws that come with carbon markets, issues around rights, issues around seeing Africa as an empty land that needs to be colonized, and all those issues that we have highlighted. So how is this regulation helping address those issues? I think those are the questions that our narrative should be speaking to. That look, these are reports that have shown these are the flaws within the market. And now that we are developing frameworks that are able to regulate the market, how are we addressing
Exactly. And I'll ask you to take a look at this page down to earth, which has a map, and you will see how many African countries have actually come up with rules here. So in fact, Helen, that's one thing we are doing also now, is to do a deep dive into all these regulations so that we can look at it exactly as Amos has said, from our framing. Have they talked about the price? Have they talked about the rights of community? Have they talked about the sharing of benefits with communities? Have they talked about the issue of NDC? Who will earn from this? So we are basically looking at this in this framing, and hopefully this will help to push the dialogue further. So we now, Shubhanu, you keep us on track, huh? Now, another 10 minutes. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Suzio Chitete. I work for National Publications Limited in Malawi on the investigative desk. Yeah, I just took a slide, I think just a picture of a slide, and I bounced it to one of the people in Malawi, who's sort of an activist on these issues, on whether with that slide they have a different opinion, and I caught what he has just written. As I think you are aware, I very much have similar concerns about many of the carbon projects in Malawi. My sense is that the climate benefits have been far overestimated.
Exactly.
The benefit of users, that is the people actually reducing emissions, are end of court. Anyway, it seems like it's a paradigm shift, because I was just trying to throw it to him, meaning the study or this may have been premised in India, but truly it's similar to experiences elsewhere. That was just my compliment. My question is to Power Shift Africa. So my question to Amos. Yes. Thank you so much. I know you're smiling, but I will still fire the question at you. Yeah. No, thanks so much. You spoke something very important about the 5% of the land being arable land in Africa. And true, I'm coming from a country where we're asking the same question. Our people are food insecure now and again. And actually, just this year, we had Cyclone Freddy, which killed many, destroying property. And indeed, just exacerbated the anger issue. And we know for sure 4.4 million people in Malawi again are going hungry to next year. And the support will still be going to them. But we have a lot of land. What is the experience elsewhere? Where are we failing when we have all this land? Sure, we need irrigation. I mean, we don't have to depend on the rains. Where are we failing? Because when I listen to you, there is also a worry. I think the same worry that has been advanced by opponents of the Green Revolution project, where the neo-colonialism is coming in. Now, when the West or other advanced countries are coming again to offer us the technology, the big companies saying, okay, give us this land for investment, will help you to bring food security, because you can't manage, you are poor, you don't have the resources. We do. Should we be skeptical, or how do we strike a balance when we seem to have failed to feed ourselves? Should we look up West or elsewhere? And what happens to the same field of neo-colonialism? Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. I think the question of food sovereignty and also building resilience of our systems, not just the food systems, but also the system, is very important. You realize that Malawi is not the first time is seeing droughts or floods, but because of climate change, it's become frequent. So we had traditional practices. We had our own city systems that were resilient to this. But the challenge is we are giving up our indigenous practices, our indigenous knowledge to new what we call modernized solutions. And Sunita mentioned technology is fake. When it fails, we are giving about tech fixes that we invest in GMOs and those kind of farming practices that are dependent on the outside world. We are losing control of our food systems because right now we are planting seed varieties that will require certain fertilizers to be applied. And if you don't apply that fertilizer, then the productivity is not that good. Recently, Kenya supplied fertilizers to farmers, but despite the fertilizers being supplied, this did not increase the yields. So we have given up our practices, we have given up our systems to control by the corporate world. And I'm not saying that we should avoid research and applying modern practices, but this also should be built on our indigenous local practices and local systems. Then Chris was going to talk about preparedness. I think we are not providing much information to our communities. We need to invest in providing information to our communities, systems that are able to provide early warning systems, but also being able to prepare our communities for some of these events. And like I said, these events should not always turn into disasters. If we have systems in place that inform our communities, and if we are advancing our research based on our practices, not undermining our knowledge, I think we are able to build resilience. But this requires a shift in policy and the way we approach our engagements. Africa doesn't have a clear industrial policy where it participates effectively in the value chains of its production activities, be it minerals, be it agricultural produce, be it energy. We always are known to be supplying raw materials. Why can't we equip our communities to be able to add value to some of these products that we produce, to be able to get the real value of our land, the real value of our work? And finally, I think one of the things that we should be doing, escaping my mind, it's about, I have an idea, but if it comes to mind, I'll speak about it.
No problem, Amos. Yes.
Okay, and I was get to the bit. I just wanted to check with your township, what is your position in terms of the ongoing court in terms of the climate crisis? Also, in terms of the view that a large percentage of that contributes to living village poverty.
I like that question. And also, I just wanted to point out that if you go to PowerShift's website, there's a report we published earlier on just transitions in Africa, and it looks at the food systems, energy systems of the continent. So the reason we are opposed to fossil fuels development on the continent is, you rightly mentioned the issue of lack of access to modern energy services, and especially electricity by majority, about half of the population of the continent, which is estimated to over 600 million Africans not having access to electricity. This is because of an energy system that has not served the interests of Africans. When you look at the oil industry, for example, it's not very new on the continent. We have had many African countries such as Angola, Nigeria, Sudan, all of them exploited their oil. But when you look at these countries, the oil has not provided the much needed revenue that it has promised. But it has also not provided energy access to the populations in these countries. I have friends in Nigeria who constantly operate on generators because they do not have access to electricity. Take an example of South Africa that is heavily dependent on coal. I think they are going into the worst load shedding phase right now. If there are any South African in this room, they would be wondering, actually, we can have electricity for this long period of time. So we have an energy system that has failed the continent, an energy system that is captured by multinational corporations. And what we are saying is renewable energy systems, fuel systems, not just moving away from fossil to renewables, offers Africa an opportunity to be able to plan an energy system that's fit for purpose for the continent. But also it offers us an opportunity for reaching to communities that live away from the central grids, such as rural communities with centralized systems. And those communities are looking to be producers of their own energy. So there's every benefit that comes with renewables in terms of helping communities build resilience, but also develop and contributing to avoiding emissions that have got us into this problem.
I can just add to that. I would request you also to see a report that we put out a few months ago called Beyond Climate Finance. Because whereas I agree completely with Amos that that's the future, the biggest issue that African continent faces today is that the future, we know what the answer is, but we do not have a way to get there. And we do not have a way to get there because of the sheer, complete breakdown of the financial structures, which today determine the cost of finance in Africa and the debt in Africa. So if you see that report, we have looked at the cost of finance. I mean, 20%, if a renewable project is made in Africa, the cost of finance, the interest cost is 20%. In India, it is 11%. In Greece, which is also an indebted country, but has the backing of the EU, it is 6%. In the US, it is 2 to 3%. So can you imagine a renewable energy project being viable in Africa if the cost of finance is so high? Number one. Number two, in that report we've looked at the interest payments by African nations annually, and you will find that actually African nations are paying more money in terms of interest than they are getting in the name of climate. So I think, and so we in that report have reiterated, and there is a lot of work now. Again, the Bridgetown initiative of Prime Minister Mia Mottley, the Macron conference, you have Marrakesh happening right now. That all talk about how to reform the financial system so that more concessional finance. And to me, this is not just concessional finance. This is actually not loans, but grants that are given to Africa for the transition that is needed. You cannot on one hand say that Africa is not contributed to the bulk of greenhouse gas emissions. Africa is most vulnerable, and then pay it money which only adds to its indebtedness. That is not vulnerable. Okay, last question. Yes. Stefano has given us the.
Yeah, thank you very much for this enlightening debate on carbon markets. One of the most pressing issues, I think, is the information gap between the governments and the local communities. When that deal, the blue carbon deal, was signed, with another one signed last week, I think, with Dubai-based company. Yeah. So it's the local communities are not aware of these things. Zimbabweans in general are not aware. You just see it as merely as a government to private sector kind of deal. So with nothing, with no connections to the masses. So that's number one. That's the number one issue that I wanted you probably to comment further on. The number two issue regards the aspect to do with what is happening on the ground because of these carbon market things. There is rapid urbanization of our rural communities where these forests are. That's a huge threat. And also the big companies that are into renewable, so-called renewable energy, like the sugarcane companies, they're grabbing land from villages. It's happening on the eastern part of our country. These are serious and highly emotive issues. And when you look at what is trickling in in terms of the amounts of money versus the real loss. Like when I went to Subanje, one of the estates, sugarcane estates on the eastern part of the country, imagine a smallholder farmer losing 20 hectares of land and has cattle, chickens. You are then moved onto a 200 square meter kind of piece of land. So there are these gaps in terms of information, and it's a pity at times that we can't report much on these things for various reasons. But if you can shed light on what can be done to improve the flow of information from the government, private sector partnerships to the local communities. Thank you.
So let me take that almost because we're short of time. I think that's the core of the problem, what you have mentioned. And I think that at least in our report, we have said that if you don't increase the transparency, and this is not just about the government of Zimbabwe, this should be done by the legislature. I mean, or by a global system in which you are forced to put all information about the project on a website. You cannot do this in a shroud of secrecy, and this has to be made public. And I agree with you. I mean, we found it very difficult to report as well because, of not knowing even the project sites. And at one time, I was very keen that we carry a similar investigation into different countries in Africa on REDD+ and the carbon market. And the problem again was not having information. Where do you go? And if you don't go to the right place, your entire report will be destroyed saying, oh, they just went to some other wrong village. But my only request to us as a community is that this is a very critical time in the world when the world is desperately looking for answers. Now, if the answers are wrong, it will only mean that we are going to waste more time. And it is our jobs as civil society, as journalists, as reporters, to holding a mirror to what's happening. How we do it, how deftly we do it, will be something that we will all have to do. But when it comes to minerals, the mining that is happening in the name of the new economy, when it comes to carbon credit markets, when it comes to, many of the new issues. So even as we want to move the transition towards a low carbon future, it cannot be done on the backs and on the bodies of the poor in our world. And I think it is important for us to call it out. It is very difficult because I can tell you there are groups based in Delhi, wherever it is very hard to get international groups to agree to these things because they would like a narrative which is cute, simple, and fits their line. All this is happening, very good, working. So it's our job, and we'll do it. We'll continue to do it, and we'll keep partnering with all of you. We'll keep pushing it. And I know Amos and PowerShift Africa does amazing work, and you will continue to do what you can. So thank you very much. I'm going to close this now because otherwise he's my boss at the back, and he is going to really kill me because the next has to start. We break.
Thanks, Sumita, also Center for Science and Environment. It's a pleasure to meet you all, and I hope we can finish this conversation in one session. So let's keep talking.
Absolutely, Amos. Thank you.
We can break for me. It's right behind the Yogi, his body, and come back. Okay.